We're now going to look at the different groups of seedless plants. Until recently, all algae were considered part of kingdom Plantae, but brown and golden algae have been reassigned to Protus supergroup Chroma alveolata, and this is due to differences in photosynthetic biochemistry and pigments. Red and green algae, alongside land plants, are all part of the Protus group Archaeoplastida. Green algae have the same photosynthetic pigments as land plants. Green algae and land plants also store glucose as starch. Green algae fall into two groups: chlorophytes, which include chlorella, chlamydomonas, and ova, also known as sea lettuce, as well as volvox. Charophytes, which include the desmids, spirogyra, are all part of the group Charophyta. Green algae can be single-celled, colonial, multicellular. While most green algae live in water, some can survive on soil as long as there is moisture. Chlorophytes and charophytes differ by the following. Charophytes in land plants have a plasmodesmata. Chlorophytes do not. Charophytes in land plants have apical growth, which is growth only at the tips, in other words, the roots and the shoots, rather than throughout the plant body. Green algae reproduce asexually by fragmentation or spore dispersal. They reproduce sexually by fertilization, some having alternation of generations. Charophytes are the closest relative to land plants, and charophytes have existed for 420 million years and live in freshwater habitats. Chara is the best studied example and is often called skunkweed due to its smell. This forms large cells into a phallus, in other words, the main stem of an algae, and nodes that branch off. The stem has no supportive tissues. Chara also has lignin and sporopollenin and have plasmodesmata linking cells together. The life cycle is haplontic. We're now in the land plants, starting with the group Bryophytes, commonly called the non-vascular plants. Bryophytes are the oldest of land plants and include all non-vascular or plants without xylem and phloem. There are 25,000 species total living in mostly damp locations, but a few live in deserts. They are a major portion of the vegetation in the tundra where it is too cold to support vascular plants, and because of this, most are closely tied to the ground, never reaching more than a few centimeters. These plants go back to the Ordovician 450 million years ago, but due to their soft tissue, it's really hard to discern if they are older than that. The leafy portion of the bryophytes are called a phallus and may have rhizoids, which help to anchor the plant to the ground. Rhizoids are not true roots as they cannot absorb water and nutrients due to the lack of vascular tissue. There are three phyla of bryophytes, although in plants, phyla are referred to as divisions. The first division is Hepaticophyta, also known as the liverworts. There are 7,000 species of liverworts found worldwide. They are called such because of the thallus resembling the lobes of a liver. Wort is an Old English word for plant. It was also common practice in England to name plants for a shape of something and add wort at the end, hence liverwort. There are pores in the thallus that allow for gas exchange, and due to the lack of a cuticle, it can only be found in wet habitats. Asexually, liverworts can fragment the thallus or produce gemmacups, which can produce asexual spores that form into another liverwort. Sexual reproduction happens with alternation of generations. The zygote is formed in the archegonium and grows into a sporophyte. The sporophyte produces the spores, and then the spores grow into a thallus with rhizoids, and then grows a male and a female gametophyte, which then produce both gamete types to help attain fertilization. Hornworts are named for the pipe-like sporophytes that grow out of the thallus. Like liverworts, they live near wet areas. This group contains stomata and meristematic cells, which help the horns grow. Hornwort life cycle can start at the zygote, in which the zygote grows from the gametophyte into a stalk-like sporophyte. The stalk-like sporophyte will then grow sporocytes, which will then produce spores, and those spores will then grow into a gametophyte thallus. Afterwards, portions of that thallus will produce antheridium, which will produce the sperm, and archegonium, which will produce the eggs. And then once these meet, the zygote is formed and a new gametophyte grows from there, making the cycle start over again. The last division of bryophytes is Bryophyta, also known as the mosses. There are 10,000 species of bryophytes, and they're found all over the world. And as I mentioned earlier, this group is an important primary producer in the Arctic tundra. Mosses are really good at absorbing water, with peat moss being an ingredient in many garden topsoils. They are also sensitive to air pollution, so their presence is a good thing. The thallus of the moss is its gametophyte stage, which appears leafy but lacks stomata, unlike hornworts. If you start at the zygote section on the moss, it will grow through the neck, forming a sporophyte, which is the stalk-like substance you see. Afterwards, the sporophyte will form sporocytes, which form into spores, and those spores release, forming into the leafy thallus gametophyte. Now, those leafy thallus gametophytes will then form into either an archegonium or an antheridium on those gametophytes. Again, antheridium produces sperm and archegonium produces eggs. When those gametes finally conjoin together, that creates a zygote, starting the cycle over again. So in addition, a calyptra is a hat-like protective feature above the sporangium with an operculum below. During appropriate climatic conditions, the calyptra and operculum open, releasing spores. In our next video, we will move on to the vascular plants, beginning with the seedless varieties.